She blocked me on every platform, had a stranger drop my belongings at my parents' house without a word, and paid 6 months of rent in advance just to disappear. No argument, no warning, no goodbye. I had seen her 4 days earlier, and everything seemed completely fine. What I am about to describe is not a dramatic falling out. There was no screaming, no confrontation, no moment I could point to and say, "There, that is where it ended." It was a slow erasure, clinical and deliberate, carried out by someone I had been planning a life with. By the time I had all the pieces, I understood everything, and I understood that I had been the last to know about all of it. We had been together for almost 2 years. We met through a mutual social circle, fell into a routine quickly, and by the 1-year mark, we were spending 5 out of every 7 days together. That was not an exaggeration. That was just what our life looked like. She kept most of her friendships separate from me, which I took as a sign of someone who valued her own space. I respected that. Looking back, I was reading the situation incorrectly. About a month before all of this happened, we had signed a lease on a house together. A proper lease, both names on the document, move-in date set for November. We had walked through the place twice, talked about furniture, talked about which room would work as a home office. It felt like a natural next step. I was 30 years old, she was 29, and this felt like 2 adults making a sensible decision together. The one moment that had ever felt slightly off was about 3 months before the lease signing. During an intimate moment, I told her I loved her. It came out honestly, not planned. She went quiet, then told me she was not ready to hear that yet. She said she would tell me when she was ready. I found it unusual, given how long we had been together, but I did not press it. I told myself that people move at different speeds. I had no reason to suspect anything more complicated than that. On a Friday, a week before we were supposed to start preparing for the move, she called me. She sounded distant and said she needed the weekend alone to sort through some feelings. She did not explain what those feelings were or what had triggered them. I told her that was fine. She said she would call me Sunday. Sunday came and went. No call. I sent a text Monday evening asking what was going on. No response. Tuesday, I called her phone directly. It went straight to voicemail, twice. That was when the concern shifted into something heavier. I drove to her apartment. Her car was gone. I decided to reach out to a couple of her friends whose contact details I had through social media. That was when I noticed she had removed me from every platform. Not unfollowed, removed, blocked in some cases, completely gone, as though I had never been there. One of her friends eventually replied to my message. The reply was short and blunt. It said I needed to learn to recognize when I had been dumped and move on with my life. I sat with that for a while. The following day, I received a text from a different friend of hers. It contained 3 pieces of information, delivered like a checklist. First, she had contacted the landlord and arranged to have herself removed from the lease, paying 6 months of her share upfront directly to the landlord as compensation. Second, any of my belongings she had been holding were now at my parents' house. Third, anything of hers that I had could be thrown away. My parents had not been warned this was coming. A person they did not recognize had arrived, handed over a bag and left without saying anything. My parents had no context, no explanation, and no idea what had just happened. I want to be clear about the timeline, because it matters. The Wednesday before she called me that Friday, we had spent the day together. We played games until late on Thursday night. She seemed entirely at ease. Whatever decision she was processing by Friday had either been made very suddenly or had been building in private for a long time while she gave me no indication at all. I had no hidden debts, no criminal record, nothing I had concealed from her. I had been genuinely happy. I had been planning a future with someone who had apparently been navigating something else entirely, something she had never once mentioned to me. A week after the initial disappearance, she sent me a long email. She wrote it herself this time. No intermediary, no friend delivering the message on her behalf. In it, she explained what had actually happened. A friend of hers, the same person who had sent me the blunt message telling me to move on, had been in her life for years in a way I had not understood. In the year before she and I started dating, the two of them had been in an on-again, off-again relationship. It had ended because that friend, I will call her Petra, had pulled back from the idea of real commitment. My girlfriend had never told me any of this, not once. When Petra heard that we had signed a lease together, she came to my girlfriend the night after I had last seen her and told her she was ready to commit. My girlfriend wrote in the email that she was in love with Petra, had been for years, and felt she had to pursue it. She called herself a coward. She apologized. She also offered at the end of the email that they could be friends someday, just not immediately. I declined that. I declined it without hesitation and without anger, because I had already started recalibrating. The house was still mine. The lease was in my name. She had paid her share for 6 months, which covered the rent without straining me. I could manage the rest myself. So I made a quiet decision. I was going to move in. I was going to build the life that had been planned, just without the variable that had removed itself. And I was going to do it without drama. There is no revenge story here in the conventional sense. I did not expose anyone. I did not confront Petra, though I had formed a clear opinion of her long before any of this. Even when she and I had crossed paths through mutual social occasions, I had found her to be someone who maneuvered conversations in ways that served her, who had a particular way of being warm and evasive at the same time. I had filed that observation away and said nothing. After the email, I went through what I knew, piece by piece, and things began to resolve into a coherent picture. The slight awkwardness when I had said I loved her, that made sense now. The careful separation between her friendship world and our relationship, that made sense now. The fact that I had met her parents only twice in 2 years, briefly, despite us being close enough to sign a lease together, that made sense now. She had been managing 2 emotional realities simultaneously and had not wanted them to intersect. I had been operating entirely in one of them, unaware the other existed. The practical steps I took were methodical. I contacted the landlord directly to confirm the lease amendment was properly filed. I reviewed what Petra's friend had messaged me and kept a record of it, not because I intended to do anything with it, but because I have learned that documentation is never wasted. I spoke to my parents carefully, gave them the context they had been denied, and apologized for the confusion they had experienced when that stranger appeared at their door with a bag. I took a weekend to go through the house, our planned house, now just my house, and began thinking about it differently. I measured rooms. I made a list. I started making decisions independently, which was something I had not done in nearly 2 years because I had been making them alongside someone else. There is a particular kind of clarity that arrives after prolonged confusion. It is not happiness, not immediately, but it is functional. It allows you to move forward without being anchored to a situation that was never entirely what you believed it to be. I moved in on the scheduled date, alone, methodically, with a van I had hired, and 2 friends who asked few questions and helped carry boxes. I did not track what happened between my former girlfriend and Petra after that. I made a deliberate choice not to. But several months later, through the kind of incidental social media visibility that is difficult to avoid entirely, I noticed that neither of them appeared to be in the situation they had upended everything to create. I'm not going to speculate on what went wrong, or whether anything did. That is not my information to have. What I can say is this. Petra had a documented history of retreating from commitment at the exact moment it became real. My former girlfriend had known this, had experienced it firsthand, and had still made the choice to dismantle a stable life on the basis that this time would be different. Whether it was or it wasn't, I genuinely no longer had any stake in the outcome. The house became mine in every way that mattered. I repainted the room I had mentally designated as a shared office and turned it into something I actually wanted. I found a rhythm. It was quieter than I had expected, but it was honest. I do not think she was a malicious person. I think she was someone who had not resolved something in herself and who handled the moment of reckoning very badly. The cowardice she named in her email was real, but I also think that everyone involved, including me, was operating with incomplete information for far longer than was fair. What I took from it, eventually, was a much sharper ability to notice when something does not quite add up, to ask the quieter questions earlier, to not mistake someone's presence for transparency. Some debts are settled slowly and without announcement. The ledger still balances,